Hi, Steve Ingram here with some more adventures with the penny whistle. If you're at that point in your career where you're ready to go for a low whistle, I have a few inexpensive low whistles here that you might be interested in my impression of. As a beginner, still a beginner, always probably will be a beginner, but for what it's worth, some entry-level low D whistles. First up is the Becker. This is the first low D I bought. Mainly because of the price. It's $25 delivered to your door, and that's a pretty good deal. This particular Becker has offset holes. That makes it easier to use what's called the piper's grip to play the low D whistle. You can't grip a low D the way you grip a high D using the outside pads of your fingers. A low D requires the piper's grip. And that means that you're going to use, on most low Ds, you're going to use the second pad of these two fingers and the first pad of this finger. The offset holes makes it easier to get your fingers in the right position, especially this one. With the holes around here on the front, it's more of a stretch. If it's off to the side, it's easier to reach for many people. So again, Mr. Becker normally makes inline holes. I special requested this particular whistle with offset holes. And it was only the second one he'd ever made with offset holes, but it came out very well. My main purpose again was to find out if I could play a low D whistle at all. And I figured for $25, it was worth getting one of these to give it a try. Then I have my second low D, which is this non-tunable version of the Kerry Optima Low D. I was really impressed with Phil Hardy's little videos on this instrument, and it's only, again, 49 pounds, $63. So it's certainly something that's worth a try when you are getting into low whistles. Then I found this WhistleSmith on eBay, used, and I couldn't resist ordering it. The WhistleSmith is unique in that it has intentionally close-spaced holes. It's made so that even people with small hands should be able to play it. Again, you see the offset holes, that makes it easier, but comparing the Becker and the WhistleSmith, you can see just how much closer together the holes on the WhistleSmith are. That makes it at least possible that even a person with small hands could play the WhistleSmith Low D. Then just for comparison's sake, and because it gets good reviews, I ordered a non-tunable Tony Dixon TB, tapered bore, all plastic whistle, Low D. And again, that has, compared to the Becker, slightly closer spaced holes, which makes it very playable for most people. Again, it's it's not a big difference, but it's a difference that is worth noting. So that's the four entry-level whistles. So what do they sound like? Let's start with the Becker. I'll just play a scale and then a tune, Amazing Grace, which is the first tune I learned to play on the low D whistle, and the one that was my proof of concept tune. If I could play Amazing Grace on a low D whistle, that was my entry into the low D whistle world. That meant I could maybe devote more time to the low D than to the high D whistles that I was already playing. Note my finger positions. Second pad of the top two fingers, first pad of the ring finger on both upper and lower hands. Now they say never do this. Never start with a low note. But when you first get your low D whistle, your first low D whistle, you probably should start with the top note and work down. That's much easier than starting with the bottom note and working up. You should always, when you start to play, blow out the airway. Hold your fingers loosely over the windway. Don't close it. Hold it loosely and give it a good blow. You'll feel the air coming out and the moisture. Back of your hand will probably get wet. That's what it should be happening. As you can hear, it's a breathy whistle. It has a lot of wind sound in the notes. And it does take quite a bit of air to play. You have to get it pretty much out ahead of you, not blow it this way, but out ahead of you in order to get especially the high notes to sound. But it does play, and the sound is not unpleasant. Some people actually like that breathy tone. So it's a good place to start, just to find out if you can play a low D whistle. If you can play the offset version of the Becker whistle, then you can probably play any of the current low Ds on the market. Next up, let's try the WhistleSmith. Again, this one is made for small hands, close fingering. Most people can play it with their fingertips. Now, I find it more comfortable to play with a modified piper's grip like the other whistles, but you could conceivably play this as you would a high whistle with just your fingertips. I find the upper holes are pretty large to be covered with the tip of my finger. I'm more comfortable covering it with the second pad of the finger. And then the Tony Dixon, again, one piece, TB003 Low D whistle, tapered bore. Now again, the theory of a tapered bore is that it's supposed to give you a more equal volume through the range of the whistle. And it's also supposed to allow for closer finger spacing on the lower hand. However, if you take a close look here, you'll see that the finger spacing on these two whistles, tapered bore and standard bore, on the lower hand is almost identical. Next up is the Kerry Optima Low D, non-tunable version. This was about 49 pounds, or around $63, plus shipping to the US, which brings it up into the $85 range. Has to be one of the great values in a low D whistle. And again, when that came and I got it out of the box and I played it for the first time, I was just totally amazed. Has a big sound. Bill Hardy says it's a budget whistle, but it's got a lot of class. In an ideal world, that would be one where I had all the money I wanted to spend on whistles. There'd be a couple more whistles in this review. They would be the Shearwaters. Shearwater makes a non-tunable aluminum whistle that goes for around 70 pounds. So that would make the cut in this kind of a review. And they also make a black PVC tunable whistle. Sells for around 50 pounds. That would definitely be part of this group. Unfortunately, my funds are limited, so those are not included in this review. So my conclusions, the Becker, again, is worth buying for $25, shipped to your door, just to see if you can play a low D. If you can, then you're probably going to want, I don't say a better whistle, but a different whistle, one that is a little easier to play. The WhistleSmith, soft, mellow whistle, great for people with small hands who maybe couldn't play any other low D, except maybe for the $500 carbony with the little chimneys inside to give it closer finger spacing. But this is about as close a finger spacing as you're going to find on a low D whistle. Soft, mellow. It does have a very unique design. I don't know if you can see, but there is no blade in the whistle. It's a hole much like the hole in a flute, and therefore it has kind of a more fluty sound to it. Many people would find that very peaceful and relaxing, especially after playing a high D whistle. Nice to practice on at home. I haven't put enough time into it, so I'm not getting the best sound out of it, but certainly has potential, especially for people with small hands. The Tony Dixon TB003, great whistle for the price. Has a nice, clear, loud volume. It's a little delicate on the low notes. Takes a good deal of breath control for those low notes, but it has the easiest second octave of any whistle in the group. Overall, an excellent beginning whistle for someone who wants to get into the low D. And not expensive. Around, I think I paid $77 for this plus shipping, which again brought it up to around $85. Of these whistles though, the one that is easiest to live with is probably the Kerry Optima. Great whistle, plastic head, so you don't have to worry about warming it up too much. I have the least amount of clogging issues with this. I have the most amount of clogging issues with the Tony Dixon, the least amount with the Kerry Optima. That's not to say it doesn't clog. It just doesn't clog as often or as badly as the Tony Dixon. Even though the Tony Dixon is plastic, and you would think it would be better in that way. Great tone. Very solid bell note. And a nice E, which is hard to do on a whistle, on a low D whistle. Nice C natural. So all in all, an excellent whistle. It's a little stiff in the high end of the upper octave. but it can be done. So again, wonderful whistle at the price. Here's a version of Wild Mountain Thyme, poorly played, but just to give you a better idea of the sound of my top two favorites, the Tony Dixon and the Kerry Optima.